I've been following developments in Ferguson, which is a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri, and if you've been following the news lately, you'll know that a few days ago a young African American man was shot dead by the police there, and it's provoked a huge reaction. There's been protests and incidents of violence. This is very similar in terms of the reaction to the Trayvon Martin case 2 years ago, and I think it's going to be another situation similar to that. President Obama and Al Sharpton have weighed into it, and it's once again provoked a debate about the issue of race and police power in America. Now, I have to make it very clear that this is still relatively early on, so I don't want to make any blanket statements as fact. At least anything I say in this video, I should say that it is information that is around now, as opposed to information obviously that could come further down the line. So I don't want to absolutely incriminate anyone. Not that I'm a lawyer anyway, I'm just a guy that's concerned, but I do think there's some very important questions to be asked here. First of all, regarding the violence that's happened, I fully understand the anger around this completely. I mean, it's my understanding this is the 5th African American male to be killed by the police in a month in America. I made a video about the Eric Garner case. That was an utter disgrace. And it seems this is still very regular, so America has not come that far since Rodney King in 1992, insofar as these sort of things happening. Bear in mind, Rodney King wasn't even killed by the police, he was beaten. What we have here is young black men being killed by the police. Of course there's been the usual sort of rhetoric of condolences and so on, but once again it's provoked a very sort of ugly situation, confrontational situation. So that's why I want to be responsible in the way I talk about this. But some people might say making a video about it just fans the flames, but I disagree. I think it's important to discuss the issues, albeit in a responsible way. Now, I've made videos where I've been very angry about cases of police brutality, and I still think I still stand by my view that is a major problem. But I do want to be responsible in this video, and I don't know the facts, I wasn't there, so all I could do as an observer is go on what is known. And the reports from the witnesses seem to suggest that there was what looked like an arm wrestling struggle between a police officer concerned and this young man, Michael Brown, who it's my understanding had just graduated from college. It's also produced an interesting side campaign, which I believe is called I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact title. I'm sorry, I'm a bit tired, but basically it's a hashtag campaign in which African American men are showing photographs of themselves in two guises. One is a respectable sort of guise, whether it be a college graduation, or one guy showed him in a clerical collar, marine, sort of things that would generally be seen as quite respectable, and the other guys is in a slightly more unsavoury look. The argument being here is that the conservative aspects of the media pick and choose what they show when there is black victims of police violence, which the insinuation being that the conservative media creates a automatic prejudice against them. In other words, if they show a photo of a young black male who's making a stupid pose as a gangster, that's going to create an instant prejudice that, oh well, he must have deserved it, he must have been a criminal, when it may well be that that was one moment of stupidity and that is not actually the whole character of the person. So that, I'm not saying that's my opinion, I'm just saying that is what their initiative is. So it is an interesting side campaign. Like most public protests about things, it would be wrong to say that all the protesters have been violent. Well, many of them have been peaceful. In fact, people have been going around Ferguson tonight holding up their hands saying, please don't shoot, as a gesture to show this was the situation with Michael Brown. I've just watched an interesting CNN report, black reporter, speaking to two black officers. I don't know if they were Ferguson officers or St. Louis officers, but they were clearly trying to calm down the situation, and tonight I'm pleased to say things do seem to have calmed down a bit, and I hope it stays that way. But there has been violence. About the violence, like I say, I understand the anger, but looting is just plain stupid. So I've no sympathy for looters. I mean, they don't give a damn about Michael Brown, they're just opportunist thugs, and I really have no sympathy for that. I think it's utterly stupid. But other people who are angry, very angry, I fully understand that, because I think there is a situation now in America that is getting out of control. And I see America as having two fundamental problems beyond anything else, two fundamental social problems. One of them is gun violence, which I've commented on many times, and that, in my view, is an issue about lax gun measures and the fact that basically it's far too easy to get a gun in America. And the second issue is police abusing their power. So it's sort of this situation somewhat between anarchy, when you see the open carry crowd, and a police state, when you see officers going around Missouri looking like soldiers in a war zone. And that's an issue that's been brought up many times. Now, the officers tonight said each specific case needs to be dealt with, so they were arguing that when gangs arm themselves like that, it's important that they replicate that in order to protect themselves and the community. But my impression of American police, and I'm saying this as an outsider, I'm British, I'm speaking from the UK, and I might well be wrong about this, but my impression is that police there are like gods. You cannot question them. So one of the things that's been brought up, of course predictably on Fox, is that if an officer stops you, then you need to... I saw some apologist, and I will call him an apologist. The guy, I'll quote this exactly because I don't want to misattribute any comments to anybody, but basically what he said was, oh yeah, the situation's tragic, but you know, why didn't Michael Brown, words to this effect, not just say, oh officer, you may have had a long day, let's just sort this out. Let's get real. The way it works over there is that you can't question the police. If the police stop someone, especially a young black man, there's absolutely no way. Yeah, this was Kevin Jackson of the Black Sphere, whatever that is, but to me he just sounded like an apologist. And it's a case of, my impression is you simply cannot question the police. If a police officer in America questions you, you have to just go with the flow, because if you say any contradictory word, in fact my impression is, if you say something along the lines of, why am I being arrested, I've done nothing wrong, they will interpret that as resisting arrest. So I honestly believe there is a police state scenario going on here. When you consider that in those situations, you know, there's always dialogue about, well, there's always debate about this, you know, the police have to make an innocent judgment. That's true, but there's far too many examples, it seems, whereby they can basically do what they want and say what they want. And it seems that American citizens cannot stand up for themselves, because if they do, they are considered to be resisting arrest. So, in other words, it's almost a Robocop type situation, and if people do question police power in that sort of confrontational situation, they're automatically portrayed as, oh well, they must be a felon, rather than that officer may well be abusing their power for whatever reason, whether they're having a long day, whether they have a vendetta, whatever it is. But there's been far too many examples of this happening, and far too many examples where the officer in question has been put on desk duty. Now in this situation the officer isn't being named. I can understand that, because there probably is a genuine risk to the officer and his family, so I can understand that. But what the Ferguson Police Department needs to make absolutely clear here is that if this officer has been responsible for killing this young man in cold blood without any serious risk, the report says the young man was unarmed, that officer needs to be arrested for homicide. Because only when you have that sort of situation in America will the situation return to a level of normalcy, whereby everyone is equal and under the law. In other words, if a police officer kills someone, that police officer should be dealt with exactly the same way as anyone else who kills someone. They shouldn't be given special treatment because they're cops. And I think that is a fundamental problem here. In America, they have privilege. I mean, why is it if someone kills a police officer, that is considered a more serious crime than if someone kills a regular citizen? Now, just to be clear, I'm not advocating killing police officers. If someone kills a police officer, they should be charged with murder. And again, like I say in all these videos, I'm under no illusions as to how difficult their job is. And let's not pretend that there aren't violent, thuggish gangs out there. There are. And of course you want well-equipped, well-prepared, disciplined and courageous officers taking on those sort of criminals. Of course you do, in order to protect society. But when you have unarmed people being gunned down in the streets of America by law enforcement, that poses some very serious questions for democracy and civil liberties. And I honestly believe there is a situation now, I say now, but this has been going on for quite a long time, whereby basically in some situations America resembles a police state. Now, it's not a full police state because you still have rigorous media debate, and that's a good thing. Although there's still huge bias in the likes of Fox News. They would argue their opponents are biased the other way, but whatever the case, there is media debate, and that's a good thing. It should be welcomed. But this is happening way too much. It is good that tonight things have calmed down a bit, but I think there's going to be very deep anger in the community, and that's entirely understandable. There is underlying factors to this. Apparently the Ferguson Police Department has 53 officers in total. 3 of them are black. Now the reason that's significant is because the vast majority of Ferguson now is black. I believe it's well over 2/3. So clearly the police department does not reflect the community, and that is a recipe for disaster. A lot of analysts have pointed that out. Whether Obama and Al Sharpton weighing into it is helping or hindering, I don't really know, but I think if Obama didn't comment on it, the black community there would be saying the president doesn't care. And so my own opinion is that probably it's justified that Obama does comment on it. It's just tragic that a young man has lost his life, apparently unarmed. So that is a very important factor. Even if he was, I wasn't there, I don't know what happened. Even if the officer thought he was a threat, even if there was verbals going on, in the end of the day, an unarmed American citizen has been shot down by law enforcement. I think no one would dispute that. So I don't want to comment too much on the details because I don't have them all, and this is still early days, but I just think this is very troubling what is happening in America. And this definitely puts question marks over being the greatest country in the world. And don't get me wrong, I'm very pro-American. I think the US is a great country, but I just think it's tragic what's happening. It's quite clear that American police have far too much power, and it's this automatic thing whereby if there is a confrontation between the police and a member of public, especially if they're black, the police will always have the upper hand, because they're vested with absolute power in those situations. If someone questions them, that is perceived as resisting arrest. Now here in the UK, we've had a few situations where it's been going down that line, but I have to say it's nowhere near as bad. I'll give a personal example actually. Recently I was visiting a friend. It was quite late at night, it was 10 o'clock, and I cycled there. Now it was my fault, I didn't have lights on my bike, and that technically is it's against the law. So an officer pulled over, and apparently what had happened was there'd been burglary in the area not long before. Now the officer pulled over, and I immediately knew why, and I said, "Oh, sorry officer, I know I don't have lights on my bike." The lights weren't working. Now the officer, I have to say, was polite. He wasn't aggressive. He was a bit suspicious of me because it was late at night and there'd been burglaries in the area, and he thought I looked like someone who apparently had been loitering around the area a week before. So I told him that wasn't the case. He asked my name. I told him. I had no reason not to. But basically, I told him what I wanted to hear, but it wasn't a case of... I felt slightly uneasy, but I did not feel frightened. Partly the officer wasn't armed, that might be the reason, I don't know. But I suggest, okay, I'll wheel my bike back. I know this is technically an offence. I'll wheel the bike back rather than cycling it back. And he said, no, it's okay, mate. Just cycle it back if you live nearby. So he was reasoning. I have to say, all my experience with the local police here in the northeast of England has been good. I've never had a major problem with them. I've had problems with other police forces in the UK, not from an offence perspective like this, which is a very, very minor offence, but just in terms of how they have handled my... I've had situations where I've been a victim of crime, and anyway, that's not really for this video. But the point there is, I honestly believe, had this been America, I would have likely have been arrested there and then. They would have caught me on some minor charge. Then I would have got angry because I would have thought it was an overreaction. I would have been... I can imagine in the United States of America that would have escalated into something it shouldn't have been. And the fact I'm a white guy probably would help me in America. If I was black, it definitely would have made things worse. I hate to say it, but I do think there is still an issue with race when it comes to America and police. I think there probably has been improvements. I want to be open-minded enough to recognise that since the days of Rodney King, but clearly there's still some very deep problems in American society, and I think it's tragic. America's not unique, but I do think it is right that America comes under scrutiny, because with their constant talk, with the President's constant talk about being the beacon of democracy and freedom and liberty, America itself actually is very far from perfect. Very far from perfect. Not that any society is, but I don't think America really is in any position to lecture other countries on issues like police brutality when you have the sheer number of cases that is happening. And let's be clear, this isn't like one case every 5 years. This is happening all the time, basically. And I think it is deeply troubling. So it's good that things have calmed down tonight, but there really needs to be some serious reforms in the States with what is happening here. Clearly, law enforcement has far too much power. Yes, you want police to be prepared to deal with dangerous criminal gangs, and no one, I think no reasonable person would refute them the right to be well equipped and prepared for those situations. But there is a danger when you see unarmed people being gunned down. There is a danger when you see a young couple who, through an entirely innocent mistake, went down the wrong way, took a wrong turning, and then were told by a female officer that they were committing a felony and they're going to be arrested. When you have situations like this, then serious questions really do need to be asked. So I think America really is facing grave questions about this, because sadly I don't think this is going to be the last such case. And unfortunately all sorts of people are sweeping into this. The KKK apparently are raising funds for the officer involved. How predictable. And of course the new Black Panthers are probably going to go in there to stir things up. So I think it's patronising to tell people to calm down, because the anger is justified, although I still think some of the violence is plain stupid. I mean, how does it take on police brutality or police abuse of their power by looting shops? That is just stupid, and those people should be arrested because they're idiots and it isn't helping anyone. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Please leave comments and think carefully about your comments. I've tried to be reflective in this video. I've tried not to make sweeping statements, but really it's a serious situation.